So we are going to be covering a lot of topics tonight. We kind of have a brief overview here. I'm not going to read through all of them. Hopefully we'll make it within 40 minutes. If not, we're just going to keep going. So.
All right, so why talk about dating? So the purpose of dating is it's a means to an end to get to marriage. So marriage is a sacrament. We know the purpose of dating, but the problem is, how do we get there? So there are competing cultural norms on dating. We don't know how to date in the modern world to successfully get to marriage.
Yeah, so like Aaron mentioned, as Christians, when we're looking for a model on how to do something, obviously our first place to look is going to be the Bible. So what does the Bible say about dating? And there are lots of examples of married couple in the Bible. You have arranged marriages. You have ones where men initiate. You even have an example where a woman made the first move in the case of Ruth and Boaz. The Bible doesn't give a model for dating because there isn't one specific Christian model of dating. Dating is a cultural experience. So as American Catholics, we need to start by asking ourselves, what is our cultural experiences around dating? So let's look at 3 different models of dating that Christians or Americans experience and go from there. So the first one that I'd like to address is the pretty obvious one, which as Catholics, we've all seen this everywhere. This is a type of dating that comes from kind of just what I call secular dating. So it's usually a consequence of the sexual revolution.
Sorry to keep bothering. I can turn off the
no problem. Go for it. Yeah, so it's usually a consequence of the sexual revolution. Examples of this are using people for sexual gratification, using sex for gratification. There's not really an expectation of marriage, maybe cohabitation. If you're looking for any examples of where you would see this kind of dating, just watch a Netflix show, or rather don't. In response to the sexual revolution, with evangelicals, we have the model of a courtship style of dating. It's more of a fear-based response to dating that kind of became really popular in evangelical cultures and also has become really popular to an extent among some traditional or more faithful or practicing Catholic styles of dating. There can be an attachment of shame or dirtiness to sexuality among Christians coming from that background. There's usually a suppression of sexuality. The model of dating that courtship provides is usually so men and women will meet each other in groups, usually at church. They'll go from groups to discerning marriage together in a very intimate, strict, we are focusing on whether or not we want to be married. So there's kind of this expectation that you'll go straight from a group towards dating someone very seriously, discerning marriage. And there's not a lot of help in getting there. Courtship kind of took away regular dating and didn't really replace it with anything. There's just kind of this expectation you'll meet in a group and then you'll go from there to dating very seriously. Somewhere in the mean is a model that people have used that we like to propose that I kind of call traditional or just regular healthy dating. So in this model, let me reference my notes real quick. Thanks. So in this model, this involves seeing multiple people and not going steady with someone until you're sure that that is someone that you are interested in seeing and discerning marriage with. Regular dating is just being open to talking or seeing multiple people. You're using it as a tool to vet potential partners to gain experience in maintaining romantic relationships and also figure out what you like in a romantic partner. The focus is on dating and getting to know people until you're ready to go steady with someone. So this lack of exclusivity until you're going steady with someone actually does help maintain chastity. So for example, if you're seeing Sam on a Friday and you know that Tuesday you're meeting up with Bob for coffee, you're not going to be tempted to really go further than you need to with Sam because you are keeping your heart kind of closed and guarded. You're being careful, you're vetting until you're ready to go exclusive with someone. So ironically, courtship doesn't help foster purity of heart because you're so emotionally attached and invested in that one person who you're discerning marriage with so quickly that it can actually be detrimental to purity in a way. Is there anything I want to add to that is, I would also say for traditional dating, asking someone out isn't a big deal. I think in Christian circles with courtship, asking someone out is kind of whoa, they're really serious, they're thinking about getting married, something like that, very heavy. In traditional dating, the expectation is I'm asking someone out because I want to get to know them more, not because I'm ready to jump into a pseudo engagement right out of the gate. And yeah, so those are just kind of a brief overview on 3 different types of dating you'll see culturally among Americans and among Catholics. Go ahead, Aaron.
Just wanted to point out that traditional dating was basically what your great-great-grandparents did back in the 1930s.
So pre-World War II, pre-sexual.
Pre-World War II. And then you got the secular dating, which came from sexual revolution, and then the fear-based response to that. So.
But let's talk about today. What's the number one way people meet each other nowadays? Consistently across the decades, you do see meeting in groups or being introduced by friends as a way that people meet each other. But a big factor that has come into play over the last 10 years is online dating. So that's where we're going to start. If you're going to use online dating, the number one thing to keep in mind is that online dating is used as a tool to facilitate as many in-person or video chats as possible with people. It's just a tool for meeting people. It's not a tool for, well, go ahead, Aaron, switch to the other side.
All right, so I'll take it from here. So this research is from the book Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari, and we'll get to book recommendations later on. We filtered through the recommendations to what actually applies to us as Christians. So here's some profile tips, where you're from, what you're looking for in a partner, a few things that you're passionate about, and we'll get to the pictures part in a moment. So there's different apps. We actually met on Catholic Match, but that was back in 2020. So there are a bunch of other apps to try. So photos. So for both men and women, get professional editorial style photos taken of you. Wear stylish and tailored clothing. At least not baggy clothing. No group photos is your main profile pic. You don't want uncertainty as to who you're actually swiping right on. So women, smile and be flirty at the camera. Outdoor and travel photos are fine. Nothing with alcohol or posing with an animal. Now, in contrast, men, don't smile. Look away from the camera, like you're thinking about something very deeply. Okay, so photos with animals are the most effective for guys. And I will get to that in particular. So photos showing them doing something interesting are also good. Mastery. So the least effective photos were involving the outdoors, drinking, or travel photos. They're pretty generic. So, posing with an animal, no, for women, don't do that. Straightforward smiling pic, okay, cool. And then flirting, just a little playful, awesome, great, that's the best. So, for guys, when I said with an animal, I meant an alive one. No dead fish photos, please, or deer or anything like that. Make sure it's an alive animal.
Where did you get these photos?
So this photo is actually from online to find an example, but the photos with that interesting border are actually lifted from the book Modern Romance that he was specifically using as examples to get the point across. So the not smiling, looking away photo, something interesting, even better. Now, the best photo, the best one.
One that takes the cake. So this will 100% work every situation.
Holding a puppy while spelunking.
Would have been better if he was looking away. Would have been better.
Caisey thinks it's Photoshopped, but I want to believe.
I'm pretty sure the puppy's Photoshopped.
I want to believe that actually happened.
Could.
All right, so we're going to talk about dating process pitfalls. Take it away, Caisey.
Yeah, so while we're on the matter of online dating, there are lots of pitfalls that both men and women can fall into. We kind of divided them into 2 categories, as well as things that do apply to both. So just some things I want to address for women is, and I'm not saying this is true for everyone, but some things that I have seen just from my own personal friendships, experiences, conversations I've had with people. The first one I want to touch on is active participation. A good dating relationship is not just going to fall into your lap. God wants you to be an active participant in your dating lifestyle. Another thing I like to touch on is kind of what I call the hallmark effect. This is kind of the idea that maybe you have a list of expectations and you're kind of looking for the guy who's going to fit that list perfectly. Men are just as diverse as women are, In your experience in dating, you're probably going to encounter like a diversity of people, a diversity of men with different personalities, different interests, different devotions, different ways of prayer. Kind of expecting someone to meet every checklist on your list is a little unrealistic. Your partner is not God. They cannot fulfill all of your needs. So you are looking, while you're dating, you also do want a strong spiritual community around you that can support you, friendships that can also meet your other needs. Your partner can't meet all of those needs. This one can be a problem for women too, is people pleasing or just kind of agreeing to get along. Being able to set healthy boundaries, being able to assert your needs, what you're asking for, what you're looking for in a relationship, actually is an attractive trait. So not having boundaries is another pitfall women can fall into, like kind of saying yes to everything. You need to be able to know like what I'm okay with, what I'm not okay with, and being able to communicate that healthily in a relationship with someone. Oh, and for both, and this is especially applicable to online dating, is fear of commitment. Remember that online dating is a tool to facilitate as many in-person connections as possible. It's not for endlessly swiping, and it's not for endlessly messaging back and forth, like what I call pen pals on the app. They did a study once where they gave participants a choice of jams, like 20 jams, and they got to choose one, and then they gave people 3 jams, and they got to choose one. And the people who only took one option out of 3 reported more satisfaction with their option, and people who took 1 out of 20, they reported way lower levels of satisfaction. That can be a pitfall in online dating. Like when you're scrolling, you have pages upon pages of pictures, and I think you can fall into the habit of, not making a choice. Remember that you're using it to facilitate as many in-person connections as possible. It's definitely a numbers game, but you don't kind of want to be like, oh, I didn't like that little thing. Okay, keep swiping, keep swiping, keep swiping. Trying to be decisive. If you're mostly indecisive, just pick 3 and go from there. Emotional over-attachment is another one too. If you ever knew people who dated in high school, I did not date in high school. If you ever knew people who did, I had friends in high school, they were convinced they were going to marry their high school boyfriend or girlfriend. Sometimes that works out, sometimes that doesn't. But if you're planning the wedding after 2 dates, that's a little bit like, okay, you might want to slow down a little bit. And this is for guys and girls. You need to give it time and not get too emotionally attached after just 1 date. You really need to get to know someone well and know that you're ready to take it steady before you start really having a serious emotional attachment to the person. That kind of falls under too much too soon as well. Like I said, planning the wedding after the first date, a little too much too soon. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Aaron?
Yeah, so for both, I'll touch on the too much too soon. For guys, vulnerability at appropriate times is good, but don't be an open book, especially not in the first date. Women like a little bit of a mystery. All right, so I know this is a little overwhelming with all this, and you're probably thinking, oh man, I've done these things. I've done many of these things before. But I'll touch upon that a little bit when we talk about attractiveness and confidence. So, oops. How do you go back?
Press the back.
All right, so for guys, numbers game. People are not boxes to be checked or means to an end. They're your brothers and sisters in Christ. But you will, as guys, definitely guys, hear more no's than yeses. So to an extent, it is a numbers game. So the hunt. Women feel turned off by the hunt. So, for example, like you're at a social event and the guy walks right up to you, the girl, and he's like, are you married? Do you have a boyfriend? And then when you say yes to either one of those, he just turns around and walks away and walks up to another girl. Like that's a very...
I've heard through word of mouth that's actually happened to someone, which is why we bring it up. We didn't make that situation up.
I think it was Amber Rose on the Pints with Aquinas podcast that actually said that happened multiple times. So guys, don't do that. So go to socialize and work on being a better person, and if there's a connection, go from there. And we'll discuss how you know if there is a connection. So, pen pals. So let's say you get a number or you liked each other on a dating app. You're not pen pals. Like build some rapport and then set up a date. And we will get to that later on. So, pedestalizing. This is basically the same thing as not having boundaries. But I like this word a little bit better for men. So it visualizes putting her up on a pedestal like way above yourself. So accepting poor behavior, pretending to like things you hate, agreeing with outrageous views to avoid confrontation, changing plans to fit their schedule, performing grand gestures you wouldn't do for anyone else, projecting incredible qualities onto the person which they don't have, trying to prove yourself worthy of her. So that goes into not respecting your own time, or just frankly not respecting yourself. So she's not your number one priority on the first date. Your time is valuable. You have to respect your time and therefore yourself. She can't respect you if you don't even respect yourself. So she has to earn your time and energy. So for example, you're not constantly texting or available to text. So if she asks, hey, when are you available for a date? You don't say, anytime this week, especially not in the first few dates. So your time, your energy, and your money is your attention, and they're valuable. So let's take it off to attractiveness.
So that is my dating profile pic, and I was like, oh, I'll put that one. But Aaron thought it was cute, so we put it up. That was the one that I had on Catholic Match when we liked each other. So just want to touch on some traits that are attractive in women, and I think as women we do naturally focus a lot on beauty and attractiveness, so I'm not going to say too much here. Emotional maturity, again, that kind of relates to being able to have good boundaries, not be too emphasizing on people pleasing, embracing what the church teaches about the feminine genius, learning it, kind of understanding what that means, how that applies to your life, what that means for you, focusing on virtue and beauty are also attractive traits in women. That's probably about all I have to say on it. Yeah, pretty basic.
Cool. All right, for guys. So I didn't know all the tips that I'm giving you today.
I still think it's cute. I still like it.
But I would have been looking away, or But it is
without an animal, I was okay with it.
Well, that was actually a different photo on the profile.
Oh, that's true.
So professionally taken photo, tailored clothing, definitely sets you apart. So. All right, confidence, as I was talking about before, touched on briefly. So, guys, self-worth. First of all, these traits are things that you can actually work on, the things we're mentioning. We're not going to give you a list of things to improve that you have no control over. So, your self-worth and needing validation. If you're self-pitying, guys, you need to monitor that and correct your thoughts. You need to love yourself. And on the confidence thing, this applies to women too. Confidence comes from experience too. Confidence without experience is arrogance. So don't expect too much of yourself with that. So for example, with the pitfalls we addressed earlier, you made mistakes. It's okay. Don't take it too seriously. Move on. So leadership. Let's discuss that. So she wants a man who can be her rock, steady and reliable. You will need to be the rock that stays firm in the river of her emotions in the ups and downs of life. So you can show leadership, for example, by leading her on a series of good dates, leading the conversation, and then from there, as you get to know each other, being her rock. So, playful, making jokes and teasing her in a lighthearted way. Assertive and sets boundaries. Virtues, theological and cardinal. Mastery. So for example, like you're really good at a hobby or a sport or your career. And bonus points if it's something you can show off in dating photos. So, good posture. And make sure your breath doesn't smell before a date, guys. Okay. All right, so take it away.
So one place that you will likely meet a lot of people is in church groups, volunteer groups, and social groups through friends. So remember that, if you come off very strong as being on the hunt for a relationship, that is a bit of a turnoff. If you aren't able to be friends with people who are unavailable, like priests, married couples, people outside of your age range, you're not going to be able to be friends with people who are available to you. Be a friend first in social settings. Look to develop rapport, and if you kind of vibe out that there's a romantic connection there, which we'll talk about in a second, then pursue the romantic interest. I just wanted to introduce some things to keep in mind for conversation. These were helpful for me, so I just thought I'd pass them on to you guys as well. Remember, good conversations have give and take. Look to agree and be genuinely agreeable, not people pleasing. So if you're talking with someone and maybe they love hiking and you're not a fan of hiking, you're not going to connect on hiking, but maybe you can connect on your love of fried chicken. Expect mistakes in social situations. It's going to happen, and then let them go. ask their opinion and invite them to contribute in that way to the conversation. People love having a chance to share how they feel or what they're thinking, and giving them a space to have an opinion that's different than yours and have the floor in that way does show inclusiveness. So those are just some things to keep in mind for conversations in social settings.
So there's a few things I wanted to touch on, but in general, social skills don't apply as much to women as they do for men on a broad level. Women grow up being face-to-face and talking and communicating a lot. Guys grow up side to side doing things together. So we kind of need to play catch up when it comes to social skills. So I wanted to highlight, have a mutual friend introduce you to the person you're interested in talking with. Rapport. So ideally, you want to ask open-ended questions as a guy to the girl. You want the other person to be doing most of the talking. And open-ended questions allow her to talk about herself and her life.
So how to flirt or IOIs. Well, I feel like I shouldn't have to say this, but I will. Especially if you grew up in a parish home. I think that's very traditional leaning, and there's kind of can be a little bit of hesitancy around issues around sexuality. Flirting is not a sin. Flirting is something you do to simply signal romantic interest in another person. It's low level, it's appropriate, and it's how you lower the barrier for a man to ask you out. So there's IOIs, or indicators of interest, or IODs, indicator of disinterest. These are just kind of some generic things. It's something you kind of pick up as you're talking with someone and filling out whether or not there's a vibe. So an IOD could be like turning your body away if someone's checking their phone or starting another conversation with you, giving polite, generic answers without like real engagement. Indicators of interest would be like turning towards someone, like eye contact, smiling, kind of lighting up when you see them, seeking to sit next to you, maybe even a playful touch, smiling. And remember to just put signals in context. As you're interacting with people, and as humans, we are kind of good at reading body language. You're trying to just fit this into context. Am I vibing that there's a connection here or not? And you could be wrong, you could be right, and that's okay. That's what dating is about, is gaining experience, making mistakes. And is there anything I want to add to that? I don't think so. So do remember that flirting is low level and appropriate, and it's finding out, it's kind of just signaling if you have romantic interest in a person, for both men and women. Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. All right, so how to get her number. So, flirt with her to confirm mutual interest. Never give out your number unless she gives hers. Do not give your number and expect her to initiate contact. She won't. That's your job. So, only ask if you've established a positive connection. But here's the thing. Don't wait until maybe there's the event in 3 weeks, and then maybe we're going to run into each other then, and then I'll ask her then. Nah, man, she's going to walk out the door, she's gone, you're never going to see her again. That was your shot. So, the number is a means to a date. So, you can consider inviting her on a date as part of getting the number. So, for example, I'm enjoying getting to know you. I want to take you on a date to the ice cream shop in Wallingford. You mentioned Molly Moons. Yeah, let's swap numbers. So the alternative is you get a number with the context of hey, let's hang out. Don't do the whole hangout thing. Use the word date. So even if you just get her number, be clear about your intentions to take her on a date. It takes guts, and it keeps you out of the friend zone. So, texting. So, if you're messaging on an app, the point is to get her out on a date after building some rapport, no pen pals. So, specific place, specific time, and not to hang out. Use the word date. And set that date for within the next few days to up to a week. This implies for in-person too, assuming that you didn't ask her out when you got the number or this was online. So, here's the thing with texting. The less personal the medium of communication, the less forgiving. A text typo is hard to overlook because it's permanent. You're going to text her, and then she's going to be looking at it and thinking about, oh wow, you can't spell, you don't have proper use of grammar, and that's probably one of the reasons why she didn't reply to you. So a faux pas over the phone is more likely to be overlooked. It takes courage to call someone and then actually talk to them. So they're a little bit more forgiving. And this all pans out in the statistics from the book they were citing. So I recommend using texting just for logistics as much as possible. Call and leave a voicemail if she doesn't pick up. So also, the day of the date, I recommend texting a confirmation, not a question, a statement. So like, see you today at 11 a.m. at Atticus Coffee. So guys, at this point, we should probably talk about rejection. So don't do what he's doing.
I don't know if people can read that, it's a little blurry, but it's saying, how do I find out if a girl's interested? Great question. I usually just assume they're not.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't decide for her, let her decide. So, there is, Jordan Peterson did a talk at Franciscan University in the last 2 years. And in that talk, he talked about the Israelites and the snakes in Numbers in the Old Testament. So once again, the Israelites had abandoned the faith, and God sent venomous snakes to teach them a lesson. And people were dying from these snakes. And so the Israelites came forward to Moses and like, okay, we'll come back, we're going to stop, we've learned our lesson. So, but here's the thing, God didn't get rid of the snakes. He had Moses cast a bronze serpent and hang it up on a staff, and people had to look at the staff to be cured. That was the cure. But the snakes never left. The point of the story is that there's no getting rid of snakes. You have to learn to contend with them. And man, rejection is the snake in the context of what we're talking about. Jordan Peterson's talk was great. I just took a little snippet of it. I recommend you listen to it. So, accept a yes or a no. If she says maybe, respond with, get back to me when you have your schedule figured out. Your time is valuable. Act like it. You're not booking out a night on your calendar for a maybe. So, planning a date. So, meet in a public place on your first date, such as a cafe. If you're not feeling it, you can leave. And it's safe for her too, because it's a public place. So, avoid a boring resume exchange. You don't want that. Open-ended questions. I mentioned them before, but I'll give you some examples. So, if you had to give a TED Talk tomorrow, what would you talk about? What's the most fun thing you've done recently? What's your favorite childhood memory? Who are you closest to in your family? What is your idea of happiness? Now, guys, since you're the one that's supposed to be leading the conversation and like have these questions like bouncing around to ask, if you plan on asking them, you should have pretty good answers prepared. Because if you ask that question and then she answers it and then turns back, it's like, so what do you think? And you're just like, not a good look. So I recommend multiple venues, and I'll give you an example in a moment of what I mean by that. Have fun. Don't take it too seriously. So this is actually part of the first date I went on with Caisey. So we started talking Christmas Day of 2020, and we went on online dates, and I had some questions, some open-ended questions.
So video chatting.
Yeah, to give some structure. But I didn't see her until Valentine's Day weekend in February of the next year. So I was living in Southern California, so I flew up basically 1,000 miles to meet her in Spokane because she was in Pullman. We met at a place called Atticus Coffee, and we drove to Coeur d'Alene. Big investment in time. That's not what I'm trying to tell you to do on your first date. But in downtown Coeur d'Alene, so what we did was we went to the Honey Eatery, right over there. And then from there, we walked along downtown, and then we stopped right in front of the Escape Games place. There was nothing available at the time. We kept on walking. We went to Independence Point, took some photos, enjoyed the view. It was like 10, 12 degrees outside at the time. I'd never been in a place that cold. So then we walked back. I was eager to get back inside somewhere. So then we went to a pub, we played pool, had a drink, and then we went to a different pub. Now, we met at first at a cafe, public place, and you can bounce if it wasn't working. Now, you don't have to go to a pub. Like there's the park, there's the library, if you're into books, there's a museum. There's lots of options. The idea is to go to multiple venues that don't require a big investment of like time. Like you don't need to go to Disneyland for your first date.
I mean, you can, but
All right, so
turning someone down. So this is just a part of your process, and it can happen at any point. It can happen after the first day. It can happen when someone asks for your number. It can happen after a video chat. I just wanted to give some tips on it. I would say don't lie, and I would say be clear. Don't beat around the bush or kind of imply that you're still interested if you're really not. I mean, use good social skills, be kind, but do be clear. So ghosting comes up a lot, of course, with dating, especially online. And when they were doing this research, they asked all the participants, like hundreds of people, like, how do you feel about ghosting? And almost unanimously, be like, oh, ghosting's terrible. Don't do it. It's awful. Don't ghost people. And they also asked if they've ghosted everyone. Everyone who took the survey responded that yes, they had ghosted people. So ghosting is part of dating experience. I would say if you're just pen paling with someone and you're just messaging back and forth on an app, and it's been going on for a long time and the conversation's starting to fizzle, he's not initiating a video chat, an in-person meeting, I would say it's probably fine to just kind of let it come to a natural death. I would say though, if you've had an in-person meeting or you've had a video chat and like he's indicated more interest or you are interested and you want to, I would say, or if you're not interested, anyways, if you've had an in-person meeting or video chat, I would say it's probably polite, and I always have done like either send an email or a text if we were at that point, just saying like, I enjoyed meeting up with you, I'm really glad to hear about your new job at Microsoft, but I didn't feel a connection, thank you for your time, good luck, that kind of thing. You can also just Google too, which is what I did, how do you send a message to someone telling them you're not interested, and you'll get lots of great tips on the internet. In my experience, the first few times I did it, it was nerve-wracking, it was also really hard to learn the receiving end of that. The more you practice and experience it, the easier it got. And I didn't really take it personally anymore, and I also felt a lot more confident doing it. So that was just my experience.
all right, now for the good news.
If the date went well, I would say communicate you had a good time, and I've done that either by sending like a text message or email afterwards, and that you enjoyed it. I would say sleep on it, pray on it. If you're talking to someone else, respond to that message. If you have another date lined up, follow through with it. Give it some space. And then, Aaron, did you want to touch on your end?
Yeah, so for the guys, yeah, definitely tell them you had a good time. If it was actually a good time, sleep on it, pray on it. So if you want to go on another date with her, be sure to call her within a few days of the first date. Don't wait a week, 2 weeks later. By then she's ice cold, like she's done with you. So offer another date with a specific activity, time, and location. Once again, no hanging out.
So this is the good news. So going steady and making it official. So my experience with Aaron was, so we were talking for a long time, we had video chats, I was still seeing other people. I still went on a first date with someone else. I was still messaging other people. But at some point it got to the point where I was having these interactions, I was spending a lot of time thinking about Aaron, thinking about conversations we had, thinking about things we said, and it kind of got to the point where I was like, gee, I just wish I was doing it with Aaron. It was probably about 2 to 3 months into the relationship of us seeing each other somewhat consistently. And that was when I knew I was ready to go steady with Aaron and just make it official. So, in American Catholic dating, there is an expectation that the guy should be the one to make it official. I've heard from people that different cultures actually have different expectations on that. Like sometimes they just assume if you've seen someone a certain number of times, you'll be official. I would say in American Catholic, so there is an expectation that the guy is gonna ask at some point, like, hey, I would like you to be my girlfriend, in words, something like that. These are just discernment questions that you can use for yourself at any point, whether you've had a first date, whether you're thinking about going steady, whether you're thinking about getting engaged, whether you're thinking about getting married. Are you sexually attracted to each other? Do you care if they get into heaven? Do you have fun together? I would say if you can answer honestly yes to those 3 things, that's those are green flags. So. And then here are some long distance tips when going steady. I wanted to keep it brief. I would say set times of the week to call or video chat and communicate, like, we always talk Friday night, and then if that doesn't work, we always communicate another time we can keep in touch. I would put a timeline on moving. Once you're steady, I would have that expectation, like it'll be when she graduates, like once you're dating someone officially, do have that conversation on when you would move. And see each other in person as much as possible. So when Aaron and I were dating, saw each other probably about once a month, maybe once every 2 months, and it was COVID and I was in college, so we were just able to do that. But yeah, see each other in person as much as you can.
Yeah, we waited to see each other for 2 months at one point, and that was rough, and we agreed to not let it go that long between seeing each other. So, one tip I had in regards to this. So, as a guy, let's say she's doing something fun that weekend, like she's going to a farmer's market, or she's going somewhere, or she really likes coffee or something, just Venmo her like $5. Hey, enjoy a cinnamon roll at the farmer's market, or enjoy a milkshake.
Inflation.
Yeah, enjoy milk. Enjoy a milkshake at Starbucks. So, all right. Book recommendations. So, Modern Romance was the book that we took a lot of statistics and data from, but there's a lot of secular stuff in there, so we filtered through it quite a bit. So if you want to read it, go for it. Just keep in mind what you're getting
the
into.
first part on online dating is pretty solid, but the rest of it is not solid.
So any book by Bob Schutz. Can I ever pronounce his name correctly? So, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a classic. Boundaries by Henry Cloud. So women, guys, if you're having trouble setting boundaries, it's a great book, and it's actually from a Christian context too. So Courtship and Crisis. So the guy that wrote that book, we haven't read the book, but we read an article he wrote, and that's where we got a lot of the information about courtship versus secular dating, traditional dating.
He is an evangelical pastor, and he's done some work on how courtship, like Christian culture, has influenced evangelical circles, and so that's the background that he's writing from.
Yeah, so if that interests you, give that a read. So The Like Switch, I only got about a quarter way into it, but basically it's a body language book. So if you're having trouble with flirting or sending the right signals or reading the signals, give that book a read. That'll help you out. So if you're having trouble with boundaries, in addition to the book by Henry Cloud, I believe it's Dr. Henry Cloud, No More Mr. Nice Guy. Give it a read. So, here are some discussion questions. The QR code is actually to download the presentation online if you wanted to review it for yourself, to enjoy. So, that's our presentation on dating in a post-Christian society. Thank you for your time. Questions? And not all at once. I mean.
We're all downloading your PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All
Oh,
yours.
No one's asking you questions.
We spent so many hours on that. I'm just glad it's not being used once and then going away.
yeah.
It's like our baby. Go ahead, Father Christensen.
Do you have to give advice for people who are in like on again, off again relationships?
I think that's a good one. I would say that's probably an issue, and I don't want to insult anyone who's in that situation, but to me, when I hear on again, off again, I kind of think of people that I know that maybe struggle with boundaries or like emotional, I'll be honest, like maybe a little bit of emotional maturity issue. And I'm not calling anyone out on that, but it might be a time to maybe take a step back and kind of evaluate the pattern that you're seeing in your life and see if you can identify any triggers that are kind of causing the on again switch and what's causing the off again switch, and really spend some time in discernment on if that's something you'd like. And I don't know, I know a couple that they were dating, they broke up, they got back together again, and now they're married. And as far as I know, they've been married for a long time. So that could be your situation, but I think it was a moment of growth for them. So I would ask yourself, is this a moment of growth for me? And if not, how can I make it a moment of growth? So.
I would say two things on that. Specifically, that might be more like a codependency issue, to be exact. And then also, if you broke up with someone and then like a few weeks later, a few months later, you're like, oh man, what was I thinking? When you did it, you probably had really good reasons, and you're probably not giving yourself credit for why you made that decision at the time. So I'm just going to say that.
Go ahead. Or sorry.
Yeah, go for it first.
I know in the presentation a lot of it is the man making the first move, but why does it have to be the man making the first move? I don't have a woman.
Yeah, so I'll take that. So we talked about cultures and differences in cultures and how in the Bible there was one example of the woman initiating things. Definitely in American culture, but I would say in general, like 95% of the time, it's got to be the guy. Like, hey, if you or as a woman want to initiate things, you can go for it. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but definitely don't expect the woman to make the first move if you're a guy. So in the book Modern Romance, he actually talked about dating in Japan too. And funny enough, in Japan, people are so self-conscious about like appearing egotistic that dating profile photos are not of themselves, but of like their cats and animals. So the dating scene there is all kinds of messed up, and you can tell from their birth rate, which is basically non-existent. But the guys there, they're afraid of getting rejected, so they don't make the first move, and they expect women to, and then so women are getting frustrated, feeling the need to, oh, now I have to, and then the guys get intimidated. So in that context, I don't really think that's just a cultural thing. I think there's something to that about men and women, because men and women are different.
Yeah, I would just say two things, that dating is a cultural experience, and there is an element of American Catholic culture that does expect a man to make a first move. You can say like, oh, that should change, it shouldn't change, it just is what it is. The second thing I would keep in mind too, speaking to that, is if you think asking people out or making the first move as a woman would work for you, I would say go for it, try it, and see if it works for you. If all of this is just kind of experience and what works. If you are like, I think I should do this, that'll work for me, give it a try. Like I have heard advice, like as a woman, you could ask a man out for coffee, and like that's an okay first step. Like even as a Catholic woman, that's an okay first step. And I think you can try that and see if it works. I just knew when I read that advice, like that's not me, that's not gonna work for me, so I chose not to follow it. But if you think that could work for me, I would say give it a try and see if it works for you.
If you're going down the list of indicators of interest, IOIs, and you're like flirting, and he's just not
resonating with you.
He's not getting the hint, but he's still obviously interested in talking to you. Then yeah, I guess ask him out for coffee if he's just not getting the point. Yeah.
Give it a try. See if it works.
Get a question?
Yes, we have room for one more question.
Okay.
Two.
Picked you. We picked you.
Okay.
All right. We were talking about boundaries. What are some examples of those?
So I think some example of a healthy boundary is someone texts you and then you don't respond within 2 hours and they get upset about it. I would say that's kind of, I don't know if that's a great example, but yeah.
Well, if it's
that's
not
a
an
good
emergency.
example.
Like they're entitled to your time, but you're only in a few dates in, and it's not even an emergency.
I should know this because I have, obviously we've talked about boundaries and read on it. I would say a good boundary is something where like, if someone says something to you that you didn't like and that makes you feel uncomfortable and you're not able to say, hey, actually I didn't like it when you said that, I don't know, I looked like a fat pumpkin or something. If you're not able to say that, that's an example of someone being quiet in that situation is an example of a boundary violation. Or another one is like if someone is calling you repeatedly and they're like, you need to answer when I call, like you always need to answer when I call. And you're like, no, I'm not always going to answer when I call, I'm not available 24/7. Being able to set that boundary and then follow it is healthy. So I hope that's helpful.
Or as a guy, if you're on a date and the girl's just like on her phone, like not engaged in the date, like, hey, we're on a date. Do you need to take a moment to take care of that? Like you're setting a boundary, like we're on a date and that's not okay. And as the guy, like if she just doesn't respect that boundary, then basically what Dr. Henry Cloud recommends ultimately is then you just remove yourself. Like your attention and your time is what you remove as consequence.
Setting a boundary is setting an expectation for how you're treated in a way that's like appropriate. And you kind of start to vibe out like, you do have to answer a call back at some point, but you can answer it at a time that's like not immediately or within 5 minutes at a time that does work for you, like after work or on the weekend. So setting a boundary is kind of setting the expectation for how you're treated. Yeah.
I'm going to guess we're out of time for questions, but if you want to ask us questions personally, you're welcome to after a talk.
Yeah, thank you so much for